Access and functional needs is something I think maybe we're familiar with, but I just want to take a second and define it. So access and functional needs really refers to individuals who have physical, developmental, or intellectual disabilities, people with chronic illnesses or injuries, people who are transportation disadvantaged, low income, children, older adults, people who English is not their primary language, and women in late stages of pregnancy. So in a nation with 325 million people, the number of folks with access and functional needs makes up a very large percentage of our population. And yet historically, we haven't done a very good job as a nation of integrating and addressing their needs throughout our emergency management process. And all you have to do is look at Hurricane Katrina, where we saw that out of everyone who died, 70% had access and functional needs. What does that say about the way that we've traditionally planned, prepared, responded, and recovered with the access and functional needs perspective in mind? And it's not just something we see in large-scale disasters. No two disasters are ever the same. They vary in a million different ways. But the one commonality they have is they, every time, disproportionately impact and affect people with access and functional needs. And so recognizing this, California did what California does, lean forward. And in a bold move, the governor, in 2008, created the Office of Access and Functional Needs and placed it within his Office of Emergency Services. And my role as chief is to ensure that the needs of people with access and functional needs are identified, and that once they're identified, they get integrated through every step of the emergency management process. But what exactly does that look like? Let me give you an example. A month after I was sworn in, fires exploded in Lake County, which is in Northern California. So I'm activated, I'm deployed. And usually, it's a beautiful area, but not on that day. On that day, there was scorched landscapes, downed trees. I remember the smoke was billowing in through the vents on the van, burning my lungs. And it was eerie because the whole way had been bright, but once we got into the burn areas, the ash hung in the air so thick, it literally darkened out the sun. And I pulled up to the shelter, and the struggle was real. Cars and trucks were parked in every form and fashion you can imagine, every way but the right way. Donations were dropped off in front of the curb cuts, making it impossible for me to access the shelter from the van, right on from the street to the shelter. So I had to get creative. I pulled the car up to the curb. That's how I got in. And once I entered, I realized that in the rush to set it up, to open the shelter to the community, the steps needed to ensure it could be accessed by everyone, including people with access and functional needs, had been skipped, neglected, or overlooked. The bathrooms were incredibly challenging to get in and out of. The general population area was rough. The cots were too close together. The aisles were narrow, cluttered, and in some cases completely impassable. Now, throughout the shelter, I kept hearing everywhere I went, oh, check out the showers, check out the showers. And the shelter manager said, we've got built-in accessible showers. It's the crown jewel of our shelter. We get to the end, he shows me the pays de resistance and says, the showers are right through this doorway. Now, the doorway questions a set of double doors. It's divided down the middle with an iron bar, making each individual passageway too narrow for my chair to fit. So I asked, well, is there another way to get in? He says, no, it's one way in, one way out. And I said, then I think we have a problem. And he says, just in complete shock, what do you mean you can't fit through? That's the only way to get there. And I could tell you I hadn't really worked with people who have disabilities because he says, well, what if I get behind you and I push really hard? I was like, then you're going to break my chair. So he stopped for a minute, he's thinking, I could see the wheels turning. And it's like, ding, the light goes off. And he says, but if you can't make it through, neither can anyone else in a wheelchair. And I said, now you're getting it. So I called the State Operations Center. I said, hey, we need some portable accessible shower units down at the shelter. How many do we have immediate access to? And they said 5. Now, remember, I'm a month on the job. I know that California is like the 5th largest economy in the world. We have over 40 million people in the state. So I assumed they meant 500. And I was like, fantastic, because I was going to be the Oprah Winfrey of showers, right? I was like, you get a shower and you get a shower. We all get showers. And they're like, whoa, 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 we mean like single digits, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're all being used at a concert in Southern California, which was total junk because nobody showers at Burning Man. So we had no other option. We commandeer the showers. As a side note, I just want to say this. If you ever get the opportunity to commandeer something, do it. It's amazing. But it goes to your head super quick. I got home and was like, I commandeer the remote. I commandeer the salt shaker. My kids got sick of it really quick. Well, by the time we identify the resources and we commandeer them and we get them procured and deployed and set up, 4 days had passed, which for government is breakneck speed. But for the people with access and functional needs who needed those showers, 4 days was an eternity. Now, after the ordeal, I was thanking some of my colleagues, and one in particular, Tim Britt, Great Emergency Manager. I said, Tim, thank you so much for your Herculean effort to help us get this done. And Tim says, hey, no problem, just doing my job. I love that he didn't see it as something extra or special. But I also didn't get the sense he truly appreciated the enormity of what we'd done. I said, Tim, I want you to visualize with me. Let me tell you what I saw that day. I went into that shelter and I saw people on the worst day of their lives. I saw people who were homeless for the first time, who had lost everything. It was hot and muggy, and we were all sweaty. And ash sticks to sweat, forms a grime that covers your body. And then I saw the look in their eyes, as I had to be the one to tell them that because we hadn't integrated or addressed their needs, that they had no choice but to sit in their filth and watch as their counterparts went in and out of showers to refresh themselves. So can you imagine for 1 minute what it must have been like for those individuals when the showers finally arrived? How miraculously cleansing it must have been to go in and turn on the water and have that cool, refreshing droplets cover your body and make you new again. To wash away the grime. People told me I felt like me again. I felt like I could rebuild. I had the hope it was going to be okay. So I said, no, Tim, you weren't just doing your job. You were integrating access and functional needs. And in doing so, you changed lives. And that experience changed me. And it changed my colleagues, and it changed how our agency approaches whole community planning. And that reverberated throughout the state, which is why I went 3 years later, just last month in fact, I deployed again to Lake County, again, for fires again, this time in response to the Mendocino Complex fire, which is the largest wildfire in California state history. And when I pulled up to the shelter, I saw just how far we'd come. Interpreters had been integrated throughout the communication process. Our disability stakeholders were there. They knew what was going on and where to go for safety. There was accessible parking. Signage was everywhere. Specialized dietary considerations had been addressed. Partners from the Independent Living Center had come and teamed up with our functional assessment service teams and gone cot by cot, talking person to person, till they had met with every individual at every shelter to find out if they had unmet needs. And I'm very happy to report, yes, we had portable accessible shower units. And they were set up and ready to go because we had ordered them in advance of the emergency declaration. California sets the standard for whole community planning and integration. Now, to be fair, it's a never-ending disaster cycle, so we get a lot of practice. But in reality, it's a commitment. It starts at the governor's office. It works its way through every state agency and across every government jurisdiction. It's in the hearts of our whole community partners, our emergency managers, and our first responders, which is why together we adopt, embrace, and strive to exemplify the motto, nothing about us without us. And yet, we realize that our approach to how we plan, prepare, respond, and recover, with the access and functional needs perspective in mind, must continue to evolve because we have more fires every single year and more disasters of every kind. And it's not just an increase in number, it's an increase in severity. In other words, the threats are ever changing, the risks are growing, and the needs have never been greater. And so it is that we must embark on a new path because we cannot get enough bodies to address this. The number of emergency managers isn't going up that fast. So we have to look for new solutions, something I call integration 2.0. Let me tell you about that. 100 miles from OES headquarters is a place called Silicon Valley. And it's there that on a daily basis, they literally create the future. And it's there within that cradle of innovation that the technical capabilities of AI and machine learning must be repurposed in order to protect the whole community from the dangers of tomorrow today. I call for an end to the days when we use subjective techniques and human guesswork to predict fire behavior, where we grapple with outdated notification systems, where we allow people to die in their homes simply because they lack the physical ability to run for safety. I propose a digital transformation where we use AI to save people, not just to get them to click on advertising clickbait so they spend their money. And I call on Silicon Valley's AI engineers to use their 20% time to bring us the technology we need to save people with access and functional needs. I ask America's tech providers, work with us. Join us to reframe and rethink and reform emergency warning and alert. Use AI to create detection tools that enable us to find people in need and the accessible resources to evacuate them safely. To develop new design, prediction, and planning tools so we can ease human suffering. Now I know, particularly as of late, there's been a lot of discussion about the ethical uses of AI. And we've seen right here in this town, major companies struggle to explain or justify their seemingly trivial or even creepy uses of AI, like computational manipulation. But we can't get wrapped around the digital axle. We must think bigger. We must embark on a national crusade to ensure that people with access and functional needs stop dying in preventable situations during fires and floods and earthquakes. There can be no greater use of AI than saving human life. And within that context, we move away from artificial intelligence and begin down the road of life-saving intelligence, where the function transcends the technology, where we use machines and AI to exponentially increase the number of lives emergency managers and first responders can save in every disaster. I know it's a bold approach, a manifesto of will, but I'm from California and that's just what we do, which is why I asked for Silicon Valley's AI leaders to meet with my office in the next few months for a technical exchange meeting. Look, people with access and functional needs expect more out of government. And frankly, they deserve more. And what does it say about us if we're unwilling to use the technology and innovation available at our fingertips to save the lives of the constituencies we serve? We can do this. We must do this. And I believe we will do this, and we'll do it in partnership. Because when it comes to people with access and functional needs, when it comes to saving those lives, we will succeed or we will fail. But we'll do it together. Thank you. I really believe it when I say it's something we do in partnership. Because, I look around the room and I read the roster of people that registered, and we've got people from all kinds of backgrounds. And if you'll permit me just 2 minutes here to tell you a quick story. I've got 2 daughters, and they love to bake. At least they think they like to bake. And they asked my wife, can we make brownies? And she said, sure, and she gave them the recipe. And they looked at the individual ingredients, and they were like, this doesn't look like brownies. And my wife said, we got to mix them together. And so they did, but the issue was flour, a little bit of this, but it's fun, so they put a lot. Cracking eggs is cool, so they put 2 instead of 1. And salt looks like sugar, so what's the difference? And they baked it up, and it came out, and it looked gross. And as a dad, my sacred responsibility is to take the first bite. And I was like, how do I get out of this? So I asked them, well, maybe, you take a bite and describe the taste. And they did, and their face described the taste. So seeing the learning opportunity, my wife said, look, why don't we try again? This time, use the recipe and do it exactly as it's called for. And they did, and what they baked up were some delicious brownies. And I was delighted to take the first bite, and the second bite, and the third bite. And what I see is I look around, and I'm sure what we'll see online is, people that come from different backgrounds. Some are policy folks, some are emergency managers, some are elected officials, some are tech providers, and on and on and on. But when we come together and we're unified in this purpose, we bake up something pretty amazing. And for the whole community, and people with access and functional needs, that's what it takes. Because it's you and it's me It's people we know and love, and it's people that we have stewardship and responsibility for. And if we don't do it, it simply will not happen. So that's the hope, right? I think what we're doing is we're going to provide them with an opportunity, right? And when we lay that out, we look at the technology, and here's the thing, a lot of this exists, right? We open up the paper and we read about, Project Maven or these other initiatives, and the technology is incredible. And it's amazing. I understand it's debatable, but the reality is it either exists or it's on its way. And so we really can repurpose it for these uses. And I think that it's something that they would want to do and be willing to do, and look forward to working through that process with them. So one of the things we wanted to do in California is we wanted to make sure that people knew exactly where to go for those resources. And so we created something called the Access and Functional Needs Web Map. Try to think of a name that rolled off the tongue. It's kind of hard. Webmap.org, I don't know. So if you were to look at the Cal OES website, go to Access and Functional Needs, there's a link for our map. And what we did is we took information from the census and we broke it into every single county. So if you click on a county, it'll say, hey, there's 1 million people here. And of those million, 10% have disability. And of those 10%, 5% are deaf or blind, or list out whatever that is. And what that does, it'll also tell you languages spoken at home, age, ethnicity. It'll tell you all this for that county, which gives emergency managers in that county an idea of, okay, well, let's see, if X% use wheelchairs, then when we evacuate, we're going to need to have some accessible vehicles. If X% are deaf, we're going to need to have ASL integrated within our public messaging. If X% are this, we're going to need the following resource. And then we go one step further, and we outline for every single county in the state where you find interpreters, translators, durable medical equipment, where the independent living centers that serve those communities are, where the regional centers are, and we make it all available right there at their fingertips. And during a blue sky day, when it's steady state, you reach out, you exchange business cards, you get to know them, you partner, you plan, so that when you have a bad day, you literally click and you see the accessible transportation provider and you call the 24-hour number and you make it happen. And it's things like that that allow us, I think, to move forward, right? And that wasn't new technology. That was taking something that already existed, information that was already publicly available, and using it in a more innovative way. So I would encourage anybody that wants to do that, look at the map, and we'll give you the blueprint so you guys can take what we've done and implement it wherever you are. You guys know the story of the little bird, right? The knight's riding into town, he sees a little bird lying on its back with its feet up, and the knight says, hey, what are you doing? Why aren't you flying around with your friends? And the bird said, I heard the sky was going to fall. I'm going to catch it, hold it up. And the knight's like, little bird, your legs are weak and feeble and tiny. Surely you couldn't hold up the sky. And the bird stops and thinks and looks up at the knight and says, my legs are tiny and feeble and maybe even weak, but we each do what we can. And that's how we get there, right? We each do what we can. So thank you for your point. It is about thriving. It's about dignity. And it's about making sure it's better for everybody.